Hello to you, my fellow villain. Friday feels like an absolute age ago, which is appropriate because the game was highly forgettable. I can't remember a more choppy, disjointed, ugly game than that. Can you? I mean, if I had to compare that game to a scotch, I once bought a bottle at an airport duty-free and it tasted like someone had set a pile of manure on fire and then doused the flames with their own urine. That's how bad it was. So, not a lot to unpack in this one as we review Aston Villa 1, Southampton 0. Here's the GIF that best describes how I felt about that game. Man, look at that. I mean, even from 7,400 kilometers away, I felt the feels. With the lights dark, the field aglow, people holding their cell phone flashlights up. It was something else. If you didn't stir inside a little bit with the deathly silence, you probably don't have a soul, do you? I borrowed this photo, by the way, from Justin Hawthorne, who was there, and apart from hooking me up with Kit, takes some pretty darn good pictures. As I welcome you to the Holy Trinity show, the three key issues or moments that defined Aston Villa 1, Southampton 0, starting with the key statistics. They were slightly grim, especially the combined passing completion between the two teams. And what I focused on was Aston Villa's center backs' total duels won. Very interesting number. But boy, this was a tough game to watch. No big chances for Southampton. Mind you, we know how that feels. And 74% each on the accurate passes. But for Ezri Konsa and Tyrone Mings, combined between aerial duels and ground duels, they only lost one. And that's decent when you look at, a total of 14 duels combined on the ground and in the air. It felt like 2021 Mings and Konsa. One of the first things that crossed my mind from a footballing and Aston Villa perspective upon the Queen's passing and the subsequent cancellation of those games was that selfishly, that probably wasn't optimal given that Villa were headed off to the King Power against a Foxes side that is absolutely reeling right now. And they go to Spurs and get tonked 6-2, and that still flattered them. But who knows what would have happened in that game? Because you never do you? And instead, Villa get back-to-back home games coming off a very credible performance against Manchester City. And although I felt like the expectations of playing at home did add to the anxiety that was really noticeable from start to finish in the Southampton game, they ended up getting the results. And how about Jan Bednarak? He might have started against Leicester knowing that he couldn't play in the Southampton game, and instead what happens? Ezri Konsa steps in and looks a little bit like Ezri Konsa of old. I mean, he was solid. Mings was solid. Wasn't the most stressful of opponents to play against, but the bottom line is they got the clean sheet. And how does that now change the thinking going into those games following the international break? So it's quite funny how things work out, because after the Crystal Palace loss, I wasn't ready to hit the panic button because I didn't think the issues were insurmountable. But then a week later, after West Ham, where so many recurring themes reared their ugly heads again, not being able to break a team down and score, not being able to keep a clean sheet, poor and lazy defending, not taking advantage of a home game against a team that was in a low ebb of their form. And that's when I was ready to blow it up, because this was no longer an insignificant period of time. And people were saying during those games, why can't this Aston Villa team just graft? Just work a little bit harder like they did when Steven Gerrard first arrived. After the loss at Arsenal, especially after allowing a goal so soon after the equalizer, the Gerrard speculation was now going into overdrive. And what does he do? Like probably he's done numerous times in his playing career, he found a formula to get some kind of a performance out of his team against Manchester City, earning probably a stay of execution. Leicester gets cancelled. You never know how that's going to go. And then the players respond again. Big occasion, lots of pressure, and they grafted. And they really put themselves on the line to make sure they did whatever it took to earn those 3 points on a Friday night with pretty much the whole world watching, let's be honest. And I just wonder if this team did not believe in their manager, if they were miserable, if they had checked out, would they have put in back-to-back performances that were of that grafting variety? I don't think so. And so here we are, still conflicted really about where this project is really at. Does it need a complete change in direction? Does the earth need to be scorched? Do we need to blow it all up? Or has there been evidence, glimpses that maybe a corner is turning in the mentality of this group? I spoke with a very good friend of mine who is a devout, almost cultish Rangers fan, honestly, when he gets going. But he reminded me that Steven Gerrard's first year was very difficult at Ibrox, despite the fact that the board gave him all the time and resources that he needed. And so he chopped, he changed, he rotated, he brought people in, he pushed people out, he adjusted and tweaked his tactics, knowing the whole time that there was a pretty good chance he was going to finish top 2 in that division. And that's the difference between the Scottish Premiership and the English Premier League, because in the English Premier League, you have 19 fierce adversaries, and you can't just rest on your laurels for the majority of the season. And isn't it interesting that right now, coming off the back of 4 out of a possible 6 points for Villa, both games at home, that at Rangers, they're now complaining about Gio van Bronckhorst, that he's tactically inept, he's clueless on his rotation and his team selection, and they want him out now. I was trying to work out beforehand whether the occasion would help or hurt Aston Villa, because following Her Majesty's passing and the subsequent cancellations, the first game on the fixture list is Aston Villa and Southampton. And like I said earlier, I mean, you had the glowing pitch, the darkness, the pin drop silence, the cell phone camera flashlights, and then the anthem. I mean, if you didn't stir inside somehow, you're an ice cold human, and a lot of people will have been watching this game for various different reasons. So upon review and with the reflection of hindsight, I think this occasion did complicate matters for Aston Villa, and we have to put that into context when we look at the performance and the overall sloppiness of it all. Now, none of us knows what happens behind the scenes at Bodymoor Heath, but to find out after the fact that Ollie Watkins, Emi Martinez, and Robin Olsen were all unwell from the beginning of the week, didn't train, and nobody knew whether they'd be starting in a game of such magnitude on the Friday night, that was not optimal, and it had to be very stressful waiting until the hours before kickoff to clear players to play. You have to credit those players too for stepping up and being involved. And you would have never known really by watching them play, but maybe understanding that information now does help me forgive a little bit the sloppiness of the occasion. And you also have to think that this Gerrard regime, well, they've bent some more, they've bent even further, but they haven't broken yet. And this is exactly the kind of game that could have broken them going into an international break. Losing that game, that might have been the snap. I'm worried about this because Steven Gerrard is worried about this. He said so, just like he did about Diego Carlos right after the Everton game. Look how that turned out, and now it's a knee problem for Villa's young number 6. In a week when he was called up for France, now can't be a part of it and maybe can't be a part of the World Cup. Let's hope not. And also in a week where we started hearing whispers that maybe he's regretting his decision to leave Marseille, who's currently in second in Ligue 1 and playing in the Champions League. You know, this would be a terrible situation for Aston Villa. And imagine now if they did sell Douglas Luiz to Arsenal, where they could be. They brought in Leander Dendoncker, who can play in that number 6 position, but holy cow, this has been dreadful for Aston Villa that their 2 key signings could be sidelined with worrisome injuries. Key issue number 3, influential. Influential. Did you get it? Never mind. When the lineup came out, there was a lot of debate, a lot of conjecture, and a lot of discussion over the decision to leave Douglas Luiz out of the side because he had a very good outing against Manchester City, and put Jacob Ramsey in as a number 8 rather than the left side of that front 3. That role went to Phil Coutinho, and Phil himself has been under a lot of fire, as he should, because he's on the big dollars. But Lil Phil delivered for me. He was energetic. He was impactful. He was mobile. He was active. He entertained. Ultimately, he did help set up the goal, and I think he was legitimately named the man of the match. And he's going to have to carry on because of all the players that Steven Gerrard has brought in. There is no player that will help determine whether his manager stays more than the ex-Liverpool teammate. And so a good outing, but it has to carry on now. Key issue number 2, shocking Saints. I mean, I can't remember a worse performance by a visiting side to Villa Park in a long, long time. Everton weren't great in the first home game of the season, and Southampton was really poor in this same fixture last year. But my goodness, every time the cameras showed Ralph Hasenhüttl, he was shaking his head in disbelief and dismay. You know, there were no big chances created for the visitors. If it weren't for James Ward-Prowse's set pieces, which actually Villa limited to their credit, there wouldn't have been a threat at all. I don't know how this side isn't relegation fodder right now. Was it partially because of Villa's approach that they kept things so tight, so compact, particularly in midfield? Who knows? But they had to take maximum points from this game. A scoreless draw would have felt like a loss and, might have had wider implications heading into an international break. And the number 1 key issue or moment that defined Aston Villa 1, Southampton 0, obviously the goal. A lot of the people that complained that Jacob Ramsey was starting over Douglas Luiz had to eat their words once again because the kid keeps showing that he delivers, especially at home. And although I believe there is a better role for him that maximizes his abilities while also giving the team better balance, i.e. the left side of that front 3, you can't argue that this kid is destined for something big. And Steven Gerrard even said this week, we're going to try to build a team around him, and that's good news. However, I don't know what offside is anymore, just like I don't know what handball is either from week to week. And this is a problem. But isn't it funny how karma works as well? Because in the very same goal, in a similar time of the game, Jacob Ramsey last year was denied a goal by Kasper Schmeichel's hand control. Remember? So maybe things do kind of even out over time. And the problem with both of those laws, handball and offside, it's the same problem. It's subjectivity. It depends on who's sitting in the chair at Stockley Park or who the referee is on the field. And that's a problem when it's not clear and concise, when people don't know from one week to the next what it is. And that's why those 2 laws in particular are constantly being tinkered with and revised and reformed by IFAB, because they still haven't found the formula. I'll tell you mine, all handballs are indirect free kicks now. They're not direct free kicks. You can't get a penalty anymore unless you stop the shot from going in the goal. We know what that looks like. Offside, if there is daylight between the attacker and the defender, it's offside. Any part of that attacker is connected to the defender, it's onside. Give the advantage to the attacker. We want to see goals, not lines drawn. We're not there to see good defending. But can you see how Saints fans might be upset? I mean, if I was a Villa fan and that happened to us, I'd be livid. And don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled Villa scored. I'm thrilled the goal counted. I want them to win. I want Villa to climb the table and get out of those uncomfortable places. But when the television pundit, an ex-pro, in this case ex-villain Andy Townsend, says that he is convinced that that goal is going to be overturned because of his footballing interpretation rather than the laws of the game interpretation, you know it's a contentious decision. So the question is Jacob Ramsey in an offside position and interfering with the play when this ball is whipped in? Because if you're the goalkeeper, Are you frozen to the line because you think that Ramsey might go for it? How does he know that Watkins is going to be the guy to head it? And even from the header of Ollie Watkins, is Ramsey in the line of sight of the goalkeeper? And it needs to be said, the keeper makes an absolute meal of this by pushing it straight up in the air. But still, in this angle, you could plainly see how Ollie Watkins' header kind of goes past Jacob Ramsey. And if you're the opposing team, you can sort of understand why a player in an offside position when the ball is played in from the first phase, who then goes on to score the goal, why they could be a little bit annoyed. And if it happened to us, I think we'd be equally annoyed. But the goal stands, and what a decisive goal this could prove to be. And by the way, as the assistant referee who's standing looking right at it goes past the camera there, what a finish by Jacob Ramsey. You know, he looked like he was kind of a deer in headlights up until this moment, but as soon as that ball comes out, Jacob Ramsey is Johnny on the spot. It's a difficult angle, bar and down. Nice work, kid. And what will that goal mean for the season ahead? Will that prove to be somehow a turning point? Some positive movement in the categories we like to keep track of during the season, but my big question is, what is a bottom six side? Because it keeps changing. We'll talk about that in a second. The record at Villa Park improved. We did get a VAR decision in our favor for +1, and Emi Martinez earned his first clean sheet of the season. But this bottom six issue, Southampton looked like a bottom six side, but they're not. Villa is. So is Crystal Palace and West Ham. So should I have counted those losses against bottom six sides? I don't know how I'm supposed to rate that as the season continues. And just with that, what is a bottom six side? I think this weekend provided a few little hints that perhaps some of those teams that got off to great early starts to the season might start to get pulled back a little bit. I'm looking specifically at Brentford. I'm thinking probably Brighton and Hove Albion after the upheaval they've just gone through, and maybe even a Fulham, whereas some of the teams that had poor starts to the season, Everton and let's hope Aston Villa, may start climbing the table. West Ham's a weird one, though, because they spent a lot of money in the off-season, along with Chelsea and Nottingham Forest, and those three sides have not shown, and that spending has not translated into results. And I recall, I was one of a few that wondered, well, where was this ambition and where was this spending that we were promised in the off season? And perhaps with the benefit of a little bit of hindsight, maybe we'll look back and say, perhaps it was a good thing that we didn't go chasing the market for players in this previous transfer window. And so an international break, maybe slightly ill-timed, and the last one before the World Cup, which is incredible. And as I always say, I hope that the Villa players representing their countries have meaningful contributions during this window and come back completely unscathed, as we are having a very late summer warm spell, which has been lovely. No frost on the roof yet. Fall is just about officially here, and I have a feeling it could be a cold one this year, especially because none of us can afford to heat our houses. So what you need is a nice, warm, snuggly, hooded top that the players would wear. And this is the players' traveling jacket, the Claret model. It's beautiful. This is on my Christmas list for this year. It's going to keep you warm throughout the winter, and you can order yours down below. I've provided a link in the description. You'll be helping the show. Until next time, when two huge early October games at Leeds and Nottingham Forest loom, be well, welcome to fall, always up the mighty Villa. No, I'm not going to tell you the name of that scotch from earlier, but it does rhyme with Carolina.